Thank you for that kind introduction, Jayakumar. It's very exciting to be back with folks, even in the virtual world. It's been some time since I've been able to visit India, and I look forward to the opportunity to come back again soon. Neil and I will make this presentation, and we are excited to be part of this impressive lineup that you have created with the Department of Sociology and the Center for Diaspora Studies. It's very exciting, so thank you for including us. So yes, Neil and I will be presenting this work, Diaspora Alumni Networks as Transnational Governance Actors. This is a paper that reflects work that I've been doing for some time, and since Neil has started working with me, we've been very interested in the issue of diaspora governance, and this is a sort of a new initiative on our part, and so we are very open to feedback, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts and comments. And so I'll begin the presentation and I'll conclude, and then Neil will fill in important details in the middle. So if we think about diaspora, as our honourable guests mentioned at the beginning, the issue of diaspora and immigration is incredibly important. And this is certainly the case for Kerala, it's certainly the case for Punjab and other parts of India, as well as for many other countries around the world. And so part of the interesting research that's been going on over the last, say, 20 years or more has been to think more deeply about the role of diasporas, but also increasingly to think about their role in terms of transnational actors, and also how the diaspora component of nations sort of informs the way in which states govern their territories, because of course diasporas are interesting sort of deterritorial agents. They reside outside of the state, but they are deeply implicated in activities within the state. So we begin by thinking about the transnationalism paradigm. We are probably familiar with a lot of the work that's looked at what we call transnational networks and connections of migrant diaspora communities, how these networks are formed between the sending and receiving countries, but also, of course, how they're even more diverse in terms of the various networks that connect diaspora nodes around the world. Diaspora engagements become a growing focus for states in both the global south and the north. And we've seen the interest of international and intergovernmental organizations. If you think about the World Bank, for example, the IOM now is a UN agency as well. And so the issue of migration has increasingly been placed on the international agenda. And also the private sector is interested as well in what's going on with diaspora agents, of course, because they represent an important trading conduit. And as has already been mentioned, diaspora communities are very significant for the remittances that they send to countries. So if we think of Iskandar's work, Kuznetsov's, the Clark-Mayer, many others have really kind of begun to open that door on the analysis of diaspora engagement. And so diasporas are recognised as a key development resource for the sending countries in the global south, and they have become central to the migration and development debate. Now, they build trade and investment networks, and they contribute to social economic development in sending countries, and those countries benefit from, as we've already mentioned, important remittances, but there's also significant philanthropic activities. There's also the transmission of expertise and technical knowledge from returning elites. And so the state plays a role, of course, in this kind of diaspora engagement. So there is a national overview of diaspora formation, but it's at the regional level that we fully understand how diasporas are formed and what factors frame their exit, which is important, of course, because how communities, how individuals exit is going to be important for how they might re-engage upon return or at a later date. And we want to think about how those communities will remain connected with their origins through a politics of engagement. So it's important for us to understand the context of diasporas, and it's often at the regional level that we have a much richer understanding of the particular circumstances of diaspora formation and exit and return. Gender issues have typically been somewhat ignored in diaspora policies on the part of governments and private actors. And this is interesting given women often are considered to make greater contributions in terms of remittances, but they're also important for maintaining the well-being of diasporic families. And so Sheba George's work looking at Kerala nurses who went first, those who go first, is really still very important, that book that she produced. Other aspects of identity, of course, include ethnocultural, religious, caste, class, kinship. These are all very important in terms of diaspora outcomes and relationships. And class issues are often ignored. And we're particularly interested in class as well as caste issues in the particular notion of alumni networks. This is evident, especially as we think of the increasing focus on high-skilled groups. And this overlooks the contribution, in some cases, of marginal groups to development. And so obviously in the case of Kerala, we're very aware of the fact that we have a large number of migrants who go to the Gulf states, for example, perhaps to work in construction. They are particularly important in terms of the amount of remittances that they send, but sometimes their rights may not be fully supported or understood, partly because they're seen as somewhat marginal, lower skilled groups. And so these are all important factors to really interrogate as we think about how diasporas are part of the development agenda. And again, we tend to mainly focus on the issues of remittances, which is important. So important, in fact, that reducing the cost of remittances is one of the goals of the global the sustainable development goals going forward. But it does tend to be rather one-dimensional. And so we want to sort of complexify that to some degree. The diasporas are also conduits for particular kinds of governance approaches. And this is what we're particularly interested in with this presentation. Quoting the work of Boyle and Ho, they suggest that the global north is using diaspora politics to extend political influence into the global south through what they call disciplining rationalities and the formation of new subjectivities that keep order in the household. So from the perspective of international relations, the diasporas can be really important actors. And so, of course, how you control the diasporas is an interesting point. And certainly here in Canada, we have experience dealing with this dimension because, as you know, we have a large Punjabi Sikh community. And so this has been a very interesting relationship that we have had with India over the years through diasporas. And some of my Indian colleagues will have said in the past, you know, there are three Indias. There is the urban India, the rural India, and the diasporic India. And so there is a fully formed awareness of the role of diasporas and their role with the state. And so this is what we're interested in exploring. And I'll hand it over to Neil now.
Thank you, Professor Margaret and Professor Jayakumar in University of Kerala. So moving on to looking at India's engagement with diaspora, we see that more recently, under Prime Minister Modi, he has since experienced the importance of diaspora and engaging with diaspora for India, and he has expressed and termed diaspora as a great capital for India in the global context, and also expressed that the more we nurture it, the stronger will be India's presence globally. Even Niti Aayog has stated that the NRI community spread across the world is a significant geoeconomic and geopolitical strength for India, and our policies must incorporate this strength in order to broaden their participation in the new India beyond just their financial support. And we see in the first year of Prime Minister Modi, in his visit to the US with considerable fanfare in New York, he announced various relief measures for persons of Indian origin. So So we also see that India's engagement is particularly with a more well-off or relatively elite diaspora, and which has particularly increased since the 1990s. And we also see that India under Modi is deeply articulated and associated with Hindu nationalism, a new form of diasporic nationalism projected through specific forms of Indian nationalism, termed as the global Indian, with its projection of an elite, masculine, and Hindu Indian. Next slide. The new Indian diaspora that we focus here can be considered as those moving to North America and parts of Europe, who represent a fairly wealthy model minority migrants in those countries. And interestingly, we also see that we can be observed that many of them are the products of some of the top educational institutions like the IITs and IIMs, many of them in the fields of information and communication technology and engineering, mostly working in the US IT industry. The Indian IT workers are an important part of that globally mobile, flexible, educated labor force that global corporations require. Next slide. So looking at diaspora as governance actors, we see that the highly skilled and overseas success of migrants has attracted the attention of Indian political and policy elites. And they're also seen as a part of the development strategy, and that can be used to promote state development and promote transfer of knowledge, skills, and their financial and social capital. And the state, and we also see that the Indian state has incorporated diasporic actors into formal governance agencies, particularly for economic development. We see that NRIs are offered role in various government initiatives and agencies like the Niti Aayog, the Economic Advisory Council, or various other platforms for development and for NRI platforms. And even the IT industry of India is highly dependent upon the global circulation of IT workers for its growth and development, and their relevance, their power in the US policy making, as well as we see in the H-1B visa issue in the US to keep the visa in place during the Trump government, that the Indian diaspora lobby heavily lobbied for that visa to be in place. Coming on to the alumni networks, we see that the alumni, especially from India's premier educational institutions like IITs, and members of those alumni have been very important and instrumental in the foundation of various organizations like the American Indian Foundation, Indian Philanthropic Alliances. These organizations engage in various philanthropic activities aimed at socioeconomic development. They promote business and trade, and they also have helped set up promoting skills, strengthening capacity development, and promoting technical knowledge in various fields. And one significant organization by alumni is the Pan IIT, which is an umbrella organization representing alumni of all IITs, and Pan IIT has chapters in many of the countries of the world. More significantly, the most important being Pan IIT USA, and they have global summits every year, hosting industry leaders from India and overseas, and looking at the last two global summits organized by Pan IIT. We see that Prime Minister Modi have been invited as a keynote speaker in those summits, highlighting the importance of the Pan IIT's global summits, and again he's expressing the important role of diaspora and engaging with diaspora in India's development strategy, and calling for diaspora as global India's brand ambassadors in the global stage. So I think I should hand it over to Margaret Walton Roberts for her concluding remarks.
So in conclusion then, we want to think about the concerns and challenges that accompany the role of diasporas, and we suggest that research needs to carefully examine the growing development role of diasporas, but mainly to assess if such diaspora-led development is equitable and sustainable, especially the potential of the diaspora development nexus to kind of reproduce entrenched systems of social and spatial inequality. This is something to be attentive to. We suggest there should be greater clarity regarding issues of intersectionality and identity within diaspora groups. We think this is necessary to assess if we are to assume that diasporas can contribute to external governance and shape international relations. So if we think about diasporas playing a role in terms of governance, we need to be attentive to how that might reproduce certain kinds of inequities. We want to consider if policy interest in diasporas as development agents exists in the context of policy learning and transfer between states and international organizations. And as Pakoda and others have suggested, this shapes diaspora engagement practices in both positive and negative ways. So paying attention to that kind of policy learning between communities is also an area of interest when it comes to diaspora engagement. When it comes to the present moment, the world-class institutions that President Modi is discussing, and those who are being kind of articulated as important diaspora governance actors, are really limited to the Indian Institutes of Technologies, Indian Institutes of Management, the IITs, the IIMs, perhaps a few others. And of course, across India, the quality of higher education is somewhat variable beyond those. And this is an issue of importance because we need to recognize the significance of institutes of higher learning and their role in the development and governance agendas. Estimates suggest that half of the graduates from IITs and IIMs go overseas for further studies, and many may not return. And so this is certainly an active group when it comes to diaspora engagement, but their long-term outcomes are going to be important for understanding if we're looking for this longer-term connectivity with India and expecting them to play a stronger role in terms of development initiatives. The global concentration of power and influence of IITs and IIMs is certainly reproduced and intensified through this process of diaspora engagement, and it contributes to it potentially contributes to the highly uneven development of India. And so we have the projection of India's power through non-resident Indians, NRIs, but this is, when we look at this in some detail, it involves specific institutions and social groups that are highly concentrated in terms of caste, class, identity, religion, gender, urban, and diasporic backgrounds. And so these are issues that we think as a research agenda for a diasporic research centre might be useful to take on board. And so we thank you for your attention, and we look forward to any comments you might have. Thank you.